Hi,
Hi.
welcome everybody. Hi, Brianna.
How's it going?
Good, thank you. And you're doing good too?
Yeah. It's a lovely Tuesday here in the Okanagan Valley in Western Canada.
Awesome. I'm on the other side in New Brunswick, actually. Pretty neat. Yeah. Welcome everybody to today's Core Talks, where we talk about business and the democratization of capital. So in today's edition, we're going to be talking about the cannabis industry and the challenges they face raising capital. I'm very excited today to introduce the Queen of Cannabis, Brianna Martyn, co-founder of Big Stock Tips. Brianna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me on. I'm super excited. I met Oscar, who is part of the core ConX team in Cannabis last week, and we had a chat on my podcast called High Returns. So I entered into the cannabis industry in 2017. I would say I'm still a baby in the industry if we talk about all the legacy partners who have been in decades and decades. But what I learned is we started medical Compass Cannabis clinics, and I really learned just the benefits of cannabis. Also, just the community of the cannabis industry is so incredible globally, Canadian, US, the community is fantastic. I've exited out of my cannabis startups that I had co-founded with two others and started Big Stock Tips. So Big Stock Tips is basically a way to build a community of investors, individual investors. They don't want to read press releases. They don't want to, get their information from suits. We have kind of through COVID, we kind of had this change in how media is taken from other people. So, taken in from other people is what I meant. Sorry. And so that's where Big Stock Tips happen. It just kind of happened organically. And that's what I do. I give stock news, cannabis news to individual investors through social media. And I help other companies with social awareness campaigns, helping them reach individual investors as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Brianna. I've watched a few of your videos over the week since I've been introduced, well, not actually in person to you, but Oscar mentioned after the event that I should follow all your channels, and I have, and I really love your personality and how you come across to your followers. So I think that this video today, two girls talking about cannabis, is going to be really exciting, and our listeners are going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just be authentic is all I do. I just come as I am.
Amazing. So I'll introduce myself a little bit. I work with capital raise in partnerships, so I get to work really closely with everyone within our ecosystem at Core Connects, which includes broker dealers, investor acquisitions. So the partners that help private companies make their raise successful. So to do a capital raise, they need all these partners in place to launch their initial raise or their secondary raise, and that's kind of where I come in.
I love that. I
Yeah.
think it's so interesting learning what you guys are doing at CoreCon X, and I think you put it perfectly.
Thank you. It's been a really neat learning curve. Prior to working at Core Connects, I actually had no knowledge of this, and just the team at Core Connects super supportive, and they really want you to succeed and learn. So this is it's a really exciting journey for myself as well. So I'm excited to see how successful the company continues to grow over the years, and I get to be a part of that. So
That's fantastic, especially as a woman in business. It's so nice to be in a company that, highlights you as a woman in business and also it supports you.
thank you. So as co-founder of Compass Cannabis Clinic for, I believe it was 5 years, helping patients have access to legal products, what did you pick up from the cannabis market during this period?
I mean, the health benefits of medicinal cannabis is insane, right? Like we're not even scratching the surface. There's still so much research, but it has changed lives. And I know that there is a recreational use case for cannabis as well, and I support that as well. But the medical really, really, hit me in my soul how it can better someone's life. And so, the lack of knowledge around the benefits of cannabis, I think specifically in the older generations, is really where we can educate and change lives. Having a patient come in who was in a wheelchair and sees a doctor, gets a cannabis prescription, and then months down the road, they're walking, they're out of that wheelchair. And we've seen this time and time again. The education around products, where to get their products, because there still is, I don't like saying black market, I don't like saying gray market, but there is that are not within the legal regulations or the legal industry, and they don't really understand what is legal, what isn't, what methods to use, and there is limited delivery methods in Canada, and I would really like to see better delivery methods, but they don't even know necessarily how to do delivery of the medicine or what kind of options are out there for them. So again, just education is huge. Cannabis can change your life. The international markets, I find, are kind of like Canada 5 years ago. The reforms are coming from all over the world, a little bit slowly. And I do understand governments' kind of hesitation sometimes to roll out medicinal cannabis or recreational cannabis more strictly. And then hopefully over time, as research and kind of these things is more forefront, they'll start to loosen the regulations.
Very neat. That's unreal that you actually know of the patient that is now walking as a result of the use of cannabis and the possibilities that we may not even still know of. So the research that goes into it is mind blowing in my opinion, for sure.
And when cannabis was not legalized, or in countries that it's not legalized, then research can't happen. You do have to have special things. Also, you can't do large groups like you could with other pharma. So there are some regulations that do hold cannabis research up, but we are making waves. We are making headways all across the globe. And my hope, obviously, in the medical sector is that people will see this with less stigma and actually a medical use case.
Definitely. What would you say would be, because you mentioned a little bit about how, like in Canada, it's completely legal, whereas in some states it's not yet. So you kind of talked about how that alone is a challenge in educating individuals about cannabis, even in a legal community. What would you say might be other challenges that the cannabis industry might face?
Yeah, I think that when we talk about how hard it was in Canada to get licensing for some of these growers, medical doesn't have to go through the provincial bodies in Canada, but recreational does. So it is a little bit easier to market. But you also have really stringent regulations on marketing and information that you're putting out there, which can, be very confusing for people when they see, I'm not going to say it's Tylenol, but let's say Tylenol or Advil or, some of these other, like, I don't know, opiates or those kinds of things. They can really affect your body in a negative way. Have unlimited marketing. They can do whatever they want. They can put out ads, they can put pictures, they can make claims. And you just don't have the same that you can do in Canada with cannabis. So that can be something in Canada. In the States, obviously, there's still a lot of stigma. It's getting better. People are saying, oh, my mom takes this and now she doesn't limp because her knee doesn't hurt, right? And at least in the US, you do have CBD that's over the counter, which CBD in itself everyone should be taking CBD. 90% of the population is endocannabinoid system deficient, and CBD is the way to fix that. So CBD is just like a vitamin, but people still reiterate it, or they confuse it or connect it with THC and getting high and the stigma against drugs. So we do need to fight that. It is a challenge with regulations, but I do think it is coming. So I would say the hardest thing for cannabis companies around the globe is the regulations they face from the governing bodies.
Thank you. I do agree. When it comes to those challenges, have you worked with companies, cannabis companies that are looking to raise capital, and maybe challenges around them trying to raise capital?
I think the difficulties in raising capital today don't necessarily have to do with the regulations of the governing bodies. There's a little bit of distrust, I think, in the capital markets. Also, kind of the economy situation that we're in, there is less capital to go around. I do think that we're going to find a bottom in the cannabis industry. We're going to have green coming up. The sentiment is obviously so bearish along with the investors because they may have been burned in some of these large publicly traded companies. But I do think that will change. It just might take time for the investor community to trust this industry. Again, there's still money to be had out there. There's still money to find, but they're being way more discerning about what kind of companies they give it to. What does your leadership look like? And also, I think as individual investors or investor communities need to realize that the fundamentals of the community or the fundamentals of the company, can be so incredibly strong, and the stock price might not emulate that. And we really need to really take a look at leadership. We need leaders to be out in front talking about what they've done well, what they can do better, and what they failed at. And we need authentic people out in the media talking about these companies and really also as a whole community, as a whole cannabis community, we need to be talking to our political leaderships to help move this industry along. Safe banking, we talk about, that's a very big word thrown around the industry, or legalizing it in the US would be huge for the industry. So there are challenges, but I do think, don't lose hope, there is still capital out there. And I do think that getting a loyal investor community together and really putting authentic news out there, not just splashing press releases, would really help these companies with access to capital and their stock price.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed since working at Core Connects is a challenge when it comes to them raising capital is, at the end of the day, the companies are raising capital for their business. They're not selling marijuana. They're not selling that leaf. They're trying to raise money to grow their business, which ultimately makes more jobs. So I've found that educating private companies that they can sell their stocks. They're selling their story really to these to investors, and the investors within the private companies are essentially their fan base, their brand advocates, their customers. So I think that might also be a barrier to why it hasn't been moving as quickly as it should be. Not only that, but the payment rails weren't fair to the cannabis companies prior to raise capital privately. So through Regulation A, where a private company can raise up to $75 million, just because a cannabis company was in that industry being cannabis, they were being charged outrageous fees when it came to credit card and escrow. And now that has changed. So an investor, myself, someone like a fan of a cannabis company, for example, I can invest in a private company now through credit card, through ACH, crypto to fiat, wire transfer. And we're finding now that majority of investors will use credit card to pay for their investments because they get those points at the end of the day on their credit card. So today, if I wanted to, I can now make an investment in a private company at even something like $250. So I think that the Jobs Act and these regulations have come a long way in opening these possibilities for private companies and investors like myself, and mainly non-accredited investors. I don't need to be accredited to invest in these companies anymore. Whereas I believe it was maybe like 10 years ago, it had to be a publicly trading company in order to make that investment. And that's not the case anymore. So I think the doors are just open so much more now for private companies looking to raise capital.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you are a fan of a brand and you can then invest in that brand, it's also going to encourage you to spend more money at that brand, right? Because you're an investor. There's a loyalty that comes with the people who are already associated with your brand, and then they come in and invest and then continue to support your brand and tell your friends about it. And that's really how the individual investor community works. Like we saw, the AMC and the GameStop whole thing happened the beginning of 2021. That was an investor community that came together and made a huge impact, right? I do think, publicly traded companies do also have a struggle with that because they can't, when they touch the plant, they can't go on a lot of exchanges. And the exchanges that they can go on are not generally traded or touched by large hedge funds or accredited investor groups. They're individual investors. So it's great that they can access private companies through what you guys are doing at Connex, and also, or Core Connex, sorry, my apologies, and also, the publicly traded companies that are on some of these small exchanges like the CSE, the NEO, and the OTC markets.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about maybe community building and partnerships within the cannabis industry? I know you work very closely with community building and those partnerships in the role that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Big Stock Tips is all about social media awareness campaigns. Like I mentioned kind of already on this, is people don't want to sit in a room with a bunch of suits and have them, promise things. They don't want to read press releases, because to the general public, press releases aren't really, they're not going to jive. They're not going to hook those individual investors to really what the brand story is. So having authentic leaders out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then also what we're doing at Big Stock Tips is just reaching individual investors through fun stories about the companies. They could be private, they could be a brand, they could be public, but just doing it with modern media. So if we let's talk about TV, for instance. There are people who are doing TikToks who are getting more views than a news channel or an investment channel or a website that has a press release on it, right? They're not looking for their news that way anymore. The time has changed. COVID has really, really shifted this. Particular TikTok making huge gains in how people are, taking in their media. There is that misinformation issue, I think, that some people see on social media, but social media companies are doing a really great job at making sure they're highlighting that or putting some sort of warning on it. You do still, as an individual investor, need to do your own research. But what people want to know is they want to know the nitty gritty. They want to know what the company is doing, what it's going to, do in the future, what it's done wrong, and what it's going to do better. So that's what I do. It's authentic content. It's sticky content. It's for, finding long-term individual investors that like the story, like the company, and start investing.
Yeah, it's great that you say that, because I get to meet a lot of CEOs at companies virtually, of course, that are looking to raise capital. And at the end of the day, when their raise is live and their invest now button is active on their site, I love going through their website to like their landing page, to actually see how are they telling their story when they do the marketing to their fan base or potential investors that are going to now come to their page and make their investment. It's amazing, some of the stories that I've read and how they tell their story. And then the marketing efforts after that they've done. But like you said, they're being transparent and they're selling their story. They're not selling their stock. And I think that is very, very important as well.
People are more discerning now, right? People can see through the crap. I don't want to swear on here, but there's another word I would obviously use for that. But they don't want to see, they don't want to hear want, right? Like they want to hear the authenticity of these things.
Mm-hmm.
They want to trust where their money is going. And if you trust in the company where the money is going, then you're going to stay as a loyal investor. When you do well, you're going to invest more. And CEOs really need to understand this, that they don't want you to promise them the world. They just want you to be real. And I think this shows in every sector, no matter if it's stocks or anything else. In marketing, they say people will buy from who they like, they know, and they trust. And it's exactly the same in building a brand community or an investor community.
Definitely. So cannabis industry is like any other business. The more money that they have, the quicker that they're going to grow their business. So when we're talking about cannabis specifically, when they grow their business, they're creating jobs and tax revenue for the community. I read a stat, and it was like California raised $1 billion in taxes just from cannabis. So when we're speaking about the contribution now from that, that essentially all comes from these businesses that are now growing so fast, whether that's through capital raises or how they're growing. And essentially that goes to childcare and public safety and research. But yeah, these growth strategies, it's at the end of the day, someone that might be like discouraged when it comes to cannabis or might not be fully educated, it's that education to what will this money now bring to my own local community, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that does differ from cannabis to other sectors or that kind of thing, is the taxes that the cannabis community has to pay, not only in the regulated US states but also in Canada. It's a lot. The taxes are a lot. And so these governing bodies, whether it's a state or provincial or country, are collecting massive amounts of taxes. That does help to better your local community, your provincial or your state community. Like childcare is a huge one. I know in Canada, childcare is a huge one. I'm not privy to the data for the US because I don't live there, but I can imagine it would be similar. And so when you're thinking about putting your money somewhere, a lot of investors want to know that they're going to be making a difference. They're going to be making a difference in that company. But then also, because of these taxes that these governing bodies are taking in, you're also making a difference in the community of that state as well. That might be, important as individual investors to note, to maybe invest in the companies that are from their state or functioning in their state.
Absolutely. And when they are investing in companies within their state, as that company grows, they're only going to have more and more jobs. Like that's why the Jobs Act was created. It was to create more jobs. So as these companies are growing, more jobs are available and more families in the end are being supported as a result of it.
Absolutely. I love that. Who doesn't want to make a difference, right? Like that's what we're all here on the earth to do.
Absolutely. So what would you say, how would a cannabis company start to build that sense of community?
Any company, public, private, brand, what you need to do is you need to have authentic story. It is important to look at competitors, but it is more important that you guys are true to what you do. Whether it's like a particularly different way that you grow your cannabis, or like the brand that you have or the product that you have to market. I think just be really, really truthful to that and use modern media to reach those individual investors. They're not going to understand press releases. They're not going to want to read them. They can be very wordy sometimes. And what they want is the story. What they want is the sticky information. And so executives need to be out front and center. They need to be authentic, and they need to just stay true to who they are. It can be obviously a struggle when there's regulations and you can't be exactly true to who you are. But I've seen some really fantastic cannabis companies do this. Raj from High Tide in Canada, they also have a CBD brand in the US, is great at being on social media and be out front of what they're doing. Jason Wild from TerraSend, he also is doing a great job of that. And those are just two people that I can, point to that are doing that as executives, being out in the public eye.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm gonna have to follow those two myself, actually.
Yeah. I mean, they really Raj, their stock was down and he's like, we've changed nothing in our business. We don't know why our stock is down, but it's better to be upfront about hey, I don't know what's going on, but I'm still here with you guys. He owns still a large amount of his money. I also think executives who own and buy stock in the company that they're running is also a huge one. They believe in it. I know that David from Heritage Cannabis in Canada, he is buying his stock at chances that he can. And that means a lot to me and how they feel about the success of their company.
Definitely. So Yeah, I think that community building is very important in this sector, in all private sectors, or in all sectors in general. But I think they do, but they don't know that there's a way to raise capital from that community. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, when it might not be enough that you're a company. You need to now gather all these stakeholders, finding like-minded individuals. These like-minded individuals want to see change. That's how cannabis became legalized. All
Yeah.
these like-minded individuals came together to see that change. So, however, it still might be challenging. It's getting harder just because cannabis is cannabis. It's like my CFO was saying, that's like saying clothes are clothes. There's teens, there's youth, like senior. There's so much, and for cannabis, like there's medical, medicinal, like so. I think that is a challenge that they face, but it's something that can be overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we just all need to take a step back and realize that the world is changing. The economy is different than it was 2 years ago. Obviously, way different from what we called like the green boom of cannabis in Canada, and all of these companies were worth so much incredible money on the stock market, and money was flowing everywhere, and times are different now, and we need to understand that people like CoreCon X can help those small caps or private companies raise money, and there is a lot of different avenues. So companies just need to get out and educate themselves for sure. I do think that safe banking will obviously make a huge difference in the cannabis industry in the US. I've heard people who think it's never going to come, people who think it's 5 years, but the cannabis companies that are publicly traded do need access to some of these larger exchanges, and that will not happen until safe banking. There's also very few industries. Investors need to realize that when we're talking about having access to capital. And if you're an investor out there listening to us right now, there are very few industries that are growing as fast as the cannabis industry globally. It's one of the highest growing industries along the whole globe. So, think tech boom or when it first came out. It's a little bit like that, although our stock market is not in the best place globally, or the economic situation.
It's definitely growing, like, yeah, rapidly. So nowadays there are regulations for recreational use of alcohol, tobacco, and in many places around the world, cannabis. So the recreational possibilities are growing. Medical research is being debated with multiple uses for anxiety, pain relief, and cancer. What kind of changes do you see in the upcoming stock market for cannabis companies? I know you just touched on that a little, and what is the difference between being in investor relations for cannabis companies or for any kind of company?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, different sectors have different situations going on with them, and the cannabis sector is very unique. Like I said, safe banking really needs to happen so that these cannabis companies have access to the larger exchanges. Like I said, this community, this industry is growing faster than a lot of other sectors. There's very few, very, very few that are growing at the same level. And then again, you got to ditch the old era of press releases and really get down to the nitty gritty and come to the COVID era of social media. I call it the COVID era because it kind of really happened that way. But you really need to take a step back and realize if you were in other industries before, you can't always necessarily put the same stamp on a cannabis company. It is different. It is unique. It comes with its own unique set of challenges and successes. So, yeah, that's what I would say. I would say that IR is just different in the cannabis industry. There's a lot you can't do, but there's always ways around it, and there's still a lot you can do. So you have to kind of find a way around it all.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. Like since COVID, um, more people have been in front of their computers and are educating themselves on how they can make investments. So I didn't know that I can make an investment in a private company as a non-accredited investor. So non-accredited meaning I don't earn more than $200,000 a year. I can invest in a company, and I think that since COVID, it's really private companies, let alone just the individuals themselves, have now given themselves that opportunity to educate them a little bit more and want to invest. So, and I think that too is going to help the cannabis industry grow very quickly, let alone all private companies. It is pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is it right to go public right now too, right? Like these private companies, they do need access to capital, and maybe public listing is in the future, but it might be not necessarily the right time. I think give it 9 months and then we might see a better time to go public. But even when we're talking about the revenue of cannabis, it's insane in terms of like the medical. Like I heard a stat actually at this conference I was at last week that the revenue in Canada on cannabis is actually more than the dairy industry in Canada. So let's all take that for a second. The cannabis industry is bigger than the dairy industry right now.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I think investors need to understand there's still lots of opportunity here, but we need really good leadership in unique ways. So yeah, we're talking about like 1.84 billion in sales in Canada in 2020.
Yeah, and I think $60 billion worldwide.
Yeah, for medicinal. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yes. What other industry has those numbers? I would like to know.
Right, I know.
I think it was just over 16 billion sales in the US in 2020. I don't have 2021 numbers in front of me, but yeah, it's insane. So, if it's not the right time to go public, don't push it. The great thing is you can access capital as a private company and maybe you'll have, a public listing down the road. In the era of quick money is definitely over, but you can build a long-term business until it makes sense to go public.
Definitely. And there's still ways, like we work with a lot of companies that may not be going public, and there's still ways for their investors to have that liquidity in their investment. There are still ways, whether the company goes public or not. It's pretty neat that they don't have to necessarily go public.
Yeah. Also, we need to realize that investor sentiment right now is really terrible. Everyone's super bearish. To me, that means a bottom is in sight. If we talk about investment sentiment trading, that's kind of what it means to me. So I do think we're going to find a bottom in pot stocks, and then we're going to see all green after that. And that's for publicly traded companies. But for private companies, it's about the growth of the industry, right? Cannabis is the best long-term growth story in the world. It will never see another boom cycle, or will see another boom cycle, sorry. And it reminds me, like I said, about the tech crash. There was like a boom and then a crash, and then everything went back up again. So we're going to find the same thing. And obviously safe banking or some legalization in the US kind of will be the biggest lotto ticket for North America. But don't forget that cannabis and companies have global business plans, and globally this industry is making its waves.
Yeah.
Entering into new countries every day.
Yeah, definitely. And we're finding that people are just now learning that they can invest in private companies. So going back to these regulations, allowing a private company to raise up to $75 million, it's another avenue for these companies to raise capital. So they have more options. They have those options to essentially grow their business and create more jobs and support their local communities. So it's really exciting to be a part of
that. Yeah. And you know what? I think too, people are companies who are staying private, you do need to still use the same avenues as publicly traded companies to get your story out there. And also, what now my mind went blank, sorry about that, but you do, as a private company, still need to get your brand and your story out there. It's fantastic that companies who are private have access to this capital, because they are going to continue to grow and also give those taxes to help grow the communities and jobs. So that's really great. I think that not only Big Stock Tips, but there's a lot of people out there that are giving really great news to investor communities all over the globe using modern media. And I do think that we're going to see some interesting things going forward with that.
I do too. So I know we've got just over 5 minutes, so it's too bad our time's almost up. So on our side, regulations have made it easier for brands to raise money from their brand advocates and their customers. So the SEC changed these rules to help cannabis companies to raise the $75 million from customers with no need to go public if they choose. So on your side, I know you have experience in the business and give brands visibility and, of course, help them raise money. What would your final message to companies and the general public be?
I think for the general public, you do need to do your own research. You do need to find these companies, and there are a lot of people that will help you. You do need to learn about the brands and the fundamentals of each company in order to decide where you want to put your money. Do understand, obviously, that companies like CoreConX are helping you invest into private companies or brands you may love, which is fantastic. Reach out to Big Stock Tips. You can reach me at bigstocktips@gmail. I'm on TikTok, Brianna Martyn 1, or Twitter, Brianna Martyn, for all things news in cannabis and other sectors. And you can just really, I think, companies, you just need to take a step back and understand how you are giving out your information. How are you reaching your investors? And what is your marketing plan, or what is your plan to build your your loyal investor community? Because that is ultimately going to help your stock when it's publicly traded, and raising money through brand loyalty. So just take a step back, leadership, and think about what you're doing and how you're doing that.
Fantastic, Brianna. Thank you so much. On behalf of CoreConX, yeah, a big thank you for joining us today. I think our listeners are going to get a lot from this podcast, and I think it'll be aired on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or I think even on Amazon. So please follow CoreConX as well on all their social channels. And if you are a private company looking to raise capital up to $75 million, it would be a pleasure to speak with any of our listeners in detail, so that we can give you that insight and really let you know how you can help your company grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you guys are doing for individual investors and companies trying to gain access to capital, cannabis industry or otherwise. So thanks again for having me. Again, Brianna Martyn, you can find me on pretty much every social media.
Thank you so much, Brianna.
Thanks.